The other key feature of Oxomoxoa was the opening of the songwriting partnership between Garcia and Robert Hunter. With every track on the album listing their names on the writing credits, it was the first installment of a collaboration that came to be the compositional bedrock for the band.
Jerry, of course, became more important and ultimately all important to the band. His partnership with Hunter became preeminent in terms of generating song material. Leaving aside the fact for the nonce that it was wonderful material that they came up with, it was central to the culture that the band came out of and felt very natural to play, to sing, to listen to. It just worked like gangbusters.
The songs on Oxomoxoa were, Jerry told me in 1981, songs that they were writing to be writing songs, as he put it. And they weren't being mindful of the performability of those songs. And it's funny that he said that because a couple of the songs that he was referring to wound up being perennials. I mean, St. Stephen was a masterpiece and stayed in their repertoire for many years and was a great piece of music all the way down the line. And China Cat Sunflower was heard every third or fourth show for their entire career. As it was, they experimented plenty, threw away a lot of stuff, and wound up making a record that's actually kind of cool. It had Mountains of the Moon on it with a harpsichord. Beautiful, beautiful, very, you could see the moss growing on that one like an old English folk tune.
Cold mountain water, the dream merchant's daughter. Mountains of the moon, Electra Bow and Bentury.
Conflict, scarcity. One man gathers what another man spills. A very, very important line.
Did he doubt or did he try? Answers are plenty in the by and by. Talk about your penny, talk about your ills. One man gathers what another man spills.
The sense of the never-ending cornucopia of material comfort that fueled the counterculture, and which, as a leftist, I always knew was an illusion.
And the context was the rapid collapse of the hippie ideal. During the gestation of Oxomoxoa, the counterculture had pitched itself into a violent confrontation with conservative America.
1967, there was the Summer of Love. In 1969, you had about as close as America has come to a revolution. I mean, just campuses exploding all over the place. 1968 was the transition between those two poles. You had the Democratic Convention in Chicago, where essentially there was a police riot and an assault on this counterculture that young people represented. You had the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and you had the radicalization of the counterculture.
We started shouting a phrase, and it's a phrase that's been used in other words and by actions of people all around the world when they face troops. And that phrase is, up against the wall, mother...
What had become a kind of consciousness will change this culture. Consciousness will change our society. I mean, if you take LSD and you listen to the right bands and you believe the right things, everything will change. It just will happen, inevitably. I don't think anybody believes that anymore.
I see it as a slow dissolution. I mean, and and in addition, there's two different ways to look at what happened at the convention in 1968. I'm a political person. I'm not sorry there was tear gassing in Chicago. I mean, I'm sorry that people got tear gassed, but I think it was an appropriate level of conflict. I don't believe that the notion that everything ought to be passive resistance and Mahatma Gandhi. I've got no use for that stuff.
The Grateful Dead were only a political band by implication, but that implication was significant. I mean, there was a sense in which their communal ethic and the kind of politics of ecstasy of their shows stood as a counterexample to the grimness and you know, what a lot of people thought of as a kind of death culture that America represented at that moment.
We were an island of sanity. It sounds like an oxymoron that the Dead could be an island of sanity, but we were. It was a place where harmony reigned, at least for those 4 or 5 hours that we played.
The translation of the counterculture from a kind of politics of consciousness to just straight up politics of the street, politics of revolution, was problematic for the Dead.
Last thing I remember knowing was a lonesome whistle blown.
And the Dead retreated. The band spent much of the first half of '69 away from the boiling city streets and pursuing simpler interests, both personally and musically. They spent time at Mickey Hart's ranch, where they were visited by old friends and colleagues, including Crosby, Stills and Nash. Jerry took up pedal steel guitar, and together with his former bluegrass bandmate Robert Nelson, as well as Mickey Hart and Phil Lesh, he formed a country rock outfit, the New Riders of the Purple Sage, as a side project to the Grateful Dead. In August, the Dead traveled to New York, where they appeared at the Woodstock Festival, an event that quickly entered folklore as the apex of the counterculture. Following Woodstock, the band organized a similar festival in California, where they were to perform as co-headliners alongside the Rolling Stones. But if Woodstock was the apex, the Altamont Festival came to be seen as the counterculture's nadir.
It's an extraordinary thing to think that Altamont came 4 months after Woodstock. You know, Altamont occurred in December, Woodstock had been in August. And in Woodstock, there was a sense in which, you know, this is, you know, it's the Woodstock Nation, and this is the realization of the hippie dream. And then suddenly, it all came crashing down in California, of all places.
Nobody set out to make a horrendous experience out of it, but certain elements just sort of came together and did that.
The circumstances surrounding Altamont began inauspiciously when the original festival site at Sears Point Raceway fell through. Sears Point had been the third venue proposed to host the event, and its loss left organizers Rock Scully and the Stones tour manager Sam Cutler with only 2 days in which to secure an alternative.
We need everything that one could possibly imagine one needs for a one-day pop concert in a rush. Now, all I can ask is that people are responsible. I know that people are responsible, and I know that people will want to help.
I said it was a disaster zone, but I couldn't stop things. Nobody could stop it at this point. We had that little stage at the bottom of a hill where any drunk could just fall down and roll onto the stage. Not much less walk and climb on it. It just rolled right onto the stage. It was that close to the ground. So, I mean, it was just made for trouble.
The Stones had put on a free show in London's Hyde Park in July, at which a UK chapter of the Hells Angels had provided security. A decision was taken to repeat the arrangement, but this time the Angels would be from the organization's home turf of California, and, unlike in England, their members were the real thing.
It was never a deal for them to be security. Nobody ever said you could hire Hells Angels to protect anything. We had traditionally put a Hells Angel on top of our generator in the park just to discourage people from unplugging us. But that was it. We never had phalanxes of Hells Angels with pool cues anywhere near us, you know. And the Hells Angels that provided security at the Hyde Park show, those weren't real Hells Angels. They had black leather jackets with chalked lettering on there that said Hells Angels, whitewashed Hells Angels on the back of their jackets. You know, it was foolhardy. And I'd warned Sam, I said, what you had for Hells Angels, that's not Hells Angels. You cannot think of Hells Angels as these guys are Vietnam veterans and Korean War veterans, and these guys are, you don't mess with them and you don't ask them for anything other than to be peaceful.
Though the Hells Angels had been a fixture on the San Francisco scene for some years, and many of the bands, including the Grateful Dead, had a relationship with them. Angels could often be seen in and around free shows in the city, and the Dead had previously played Angel-organized benefits. Though on the face of it, hippies and Angels may have seemed strange bedfellows, the two groups did have some shared history.
The Grateful Dead knew them through Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters, maybe even as early as '65. That's when they started becoming a little more of a group that would be around the different hippie type events.
The hippies could get along with the Hells Angels because their minds were sufficiently open that if they laid down, their brains would fall out. It was about an American tradition, which is a notion of freedom that fails to carry with it the measure of social responsibility that I think ideally goes with freedom. Hippies were like that, angels were like that. The angels were more violent, supposedly, a little worse to women. Hippies were not so great either. Yes, they were different, and I prefer the hippies, sure. But I don't think that they were diametrically opposed. Who's diametrically opposed? My side of the counterculture, the political people. They understand that the angels are no good. I don't think that the religious side understands it that well, because they're too stoned.
Any happy coexistence between hippies and Hells Angels came to an end at Altamont. As the day wore on, the implications of having outlaw motorcyclists as a festival security presence became ever more dangerous.